I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capitol Download. We're at the headquarters of the Peace Corps with the Peace Corps Director, Hessler-Radelet. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Last week, the Peace Corps pulled 340 volunteers out of those 3 West African countries that have been affected by the Ebola virus. Was that a tough decision to make?
It was a tough decision because I am deeply committed to those all 3 countries. So it was a decision that we thought about very seriously in collaboration with the Centers for Disease Control and the Department of State. We made the decision.
And tell us about why you made that decision to pull the volunteers out.
You know, the health and safety of our volunteers is absolutely our top priority, and we just felt that the time had come where we just needed to bring them out. You probably heard that 2 of our volunteers were potentially exposed. They came into contact with an individual who later died of Ebola. They are doing fine, and they're in isolation right now and showing no symptoms. But we just felt that the very nature of our volunteers' work, the fact that they're living and working in communities, it exposed them perhaps to a degree that we just felt that the risk was just too great. So at the moment, we felt that we had to take them out.
The 2 volunteers who were potentially exposed and are still in isolation, how long will they have to stay that way before they'll be cleared to come home?
According to CDC guidelines, 21 days. So we're feeling actually very good about it. The truth of the matter is that Ebola is really very hard to contract. You really have to come into direct contact with bodily fluids. So in fact, we think that the risk to volunteers was small, but it is a very scary disease.
Do you think these volunteers will be able to return to the region?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are committed to bring our volunteers back to Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone just as soon as we possibly can.
What was the reaction you got from the volunteers when you told them everybody's coming out?
You know, a lot of them were very sad because they are so committed to their communities. It wasn't necessarily their choice, but they understood our reasons for doing it.
The situation continues to seem not under good control. Do you think it's likely to be months?
You know, it's very hard for us to know right now. The issue is that the health systems are not very strong in these countries, and it requires really meticulous care, case tracing and what have you. So it's going to be a while. I don't want to venture a guess, but it is my hope that we'll be back in not too long a time. I would say several months, though, for sure.
You got the top job here at the Peace Corps in June, confirmed by the Senate.
That's right.
It's such a turbulent world these days. You've had to pull volunteers, the Peace Corps has this year, from Ukraine, from Kenya, now from West Africa. Different problems, and the biggest withdrawals of Peace Corps volunteers, I think, in the history of the agency.
Absolutely.
How much does the turbulence in the world affect what the Peace Corps can do?
You know, our volunteers are at the places where they're needed the most, and sometimes that means they're in places that are not as stable as our country, but it means that they're working on some of our world's most important development challenges, that they are really at the forefront. And we sometimes are affected by instability across the globe, but it also shows that how important we are and how important the face of the United States is in countries around the world.
You participated in the Africa Summit at the White House, and you are again today and tomorrow. What's your takeaway from the summit? And are you concerned at all that this Ebola virus has overshadowed some of the agenda for the Africa Summit, which was really supposed to be about investment in the region?
Let me answer that one first. No, I don't think that the Ebola outbreak has overshadowed it in any way. It's been a fantastic show of support, and I think really truly unprecedented in American history. It's surpassed all of my expectations. I'm really excited.
The Peace Corps played a big role in identifying young African leaders.
Absolutely.
To come to Washington. How did you identify the people that are here from these African countries?
You know, what I'm told is that 2/3 of the young people who applied for the Young Africans Leadership Initiative were actually identified by Peace Corps volunteers. And that's important. Our volunteers are in communities in rural areas throughout the continent, and they're able to identify promising young people who wouldn't be identified otherwise.
You're allowing same-sex couples to serve together overseas. That wasn't previously allowed. And you're also letting applicants specify what country they want to serve in. Now, that's something that's different from the history of the Peace Corps.
We want to give them the opportunity to express a choice of where they want to apply, what kind of job, what country. When they depart, we're providing all the information up front, so it's a very transparent process. And we're getting a tremendous result. We had the best month we've ever had in the history of Peace Corps last month in terms of the number of applications we've received.
You don't have Peace Corps volunteers based in Paris or London, so what's the most popular location so far that people are requesting?
You know, it's funny because on different days it's different. You know, I'm not sure at the end of the month. We look at monthly data, and you know, Fiji was right up there. But then there are a lot of people who are interested in places like Botswana. Most of the people who are interested in Peace Corps want to serve. To my surprise, about half of the people who applied indicated that they'd be willing to serve wherever needed.
Last question, tell us about the impact from new technology, social media, and the other things that have transformed life in America in so many ways. How has that affected the Peace Corps?
Our volunteers now can remain connected to their families back home, so they retain that support structure. But more importantly, I think, are the opportunities that technology provides for developing our communities. And volunteers who are so savvy with technology are really able to use what they know to help their communities meet their needs. So let me just give you a quick example. In Nicaragua, there were two volunteers, Nishant and Lauren, who identified in working with young people in their community that they just really didn't know where to go when they had questions about reproductive health and sexual orientation and any kind of questions that were tough to ask in their traditional society. And they came to our volunteers, but there was a huge unmet need there. And so Nishant and Lauren created a program called Chat Salud, which uses text messaging technology to answer reproductive health questions. And they partnered up with a local cell phone company that agreed to provide texting free of charge. And it was a small pilot when they started it, but it was so successful, there was so much demand, that it's now a nationwide program that is being sustained by the Ministry of Health. So a real simple solution that was community-driven and is sustainable now because it's been scaled up and supported by the National Ministry of Health.
Carrie Hessler-Radelet, thanks so much for joining us on Capitol Download.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Susan.